Hi, how are you doing?
Very good, thank you.
Sorry for keeping you waiting.
Not at all, not at all. I mean, we'll just start. And, firstly, we have to thank you for coming down. And, we're very happy to have you at Bookscape. And this is so amazing that you just come from the signing of your third book, The Drowning. And it's been getting so many rave reviews. Would you like to tell us a little bit about that?
Thank you so much for having me over and thank you for being here on a Saturday afternoon. It's a pleasure. And yes, I'm overwhelmed with the signings and all the fans turning up at all of the stores. Reviews have been great and not so great from my parents' side because they think I've turned dark and devious. So, yes, it's a mixed reviews and I'm happy that I'm getting what I wanted from the book.
Awesome. Congratulations. Congratulations. All right. We're very excited to have this conversation to, have you tell us a little bit about your books and also about yourself.
Same here.
And you were telling us that you have this little personality quirk about your bookshelf.
A lot of them. I just told one.
Yeah. I'm sure our readers would like to know about your bookshelf.
Yes. So my bookshelf has a lot of dark thrillers. And contrary to that, I have a lot of spiritual readings that I do. Like currently I'm reading Shiv Puran. So after writing what I've written, my soul cleansing is Shiv Puran. So I have this habit of every Diwali changing the color of the style of displaying of the books. So some year I would pick up with color coordination. So all the pinks and the blacks and the blues will go in the particular direction. And I like them to be from taller to the shorter one. So call me an OCD on that front. Some days it's all about authors. Some days it's thrillers and romantic books and all that. And some days it's just plain. I will turn all of them and guess them, which is there.
Wow.
So crazy as it might sound like my books, right?
Probably genius at some level. But okay. So, I mean, I'm sure there's so many roles you play. And, we saw your Insta and your bio said author of spine chilling thrillers. That's how you introduce yourself.
Yes, these days.
These days. Okay. So, if you had to give us a quick elevator pitch for who is Nidhi Upadhyay, who would that be?
That would be a mom, a dog lover, very high on sustainability, first a woman, then an author, and again an author of very dark books.
Awesome. Okay. All right. So what we'll do is that once, because we'll get to our questions and we get to dive deeper into your books and know a little bit about you as well. All right. So let's head straight to the questions. The first question for you is, what first drew you to psychological thrillers? Was there a particular experience or something that made you realize that this is your genre?
So I think I got into writing way early before they were called psychological thrillers. My first book was by Agatha Christie called And Then There Were None. At that point of time, they were called Whodunit. And I had picked it up. Again, my reading started long back ago. And I started with very, very classical thrillers like, Munshi Premchand's Gaban Godan kind of thrillers with very character driven plots. And then I moved to Singapore. I was an expat wife, still finding jobs, and wasn't introduced to too much of English writing literature. So I picked Agatha Christie from one of the libraries and I fell in love with whodunit. And I read Agatha Christie back to back. And that's how I came into it. And thrillers were a lot later. I probably remember reading Michael Crichton's sci-fis like Sphere and Airframe. And then I realized that English literature or the kind of writing I like is the page turner kind of writing. Then also it wasn't called, I'm talking about 2004, 2005. There were no thrillers at that point of time, right? So I kind of read all of Sherlock Holmes and all of those whodunit kind of books. And then came John Grisham, Jeffrey Archer, and we had then Lynn Flynn's The Gone Girl. That changed the psychological thriller genre into it. And then I realized this is where I belong in terms of a reader. And then there was no turning back from Ruth Ware to Riley Sager. The list is endless, Lisa Jewell for that matter. And I realized I like those kind of, and you don't know what the fear is about. When there is a faceless fear acting on you, is what brought me into psychological thriller as a reader.
Found your calling in a
Yes,
very unusual.
most definitely.
Okay. So, when your first book that night was launched, there were only a few Indian writers writing psychological thrillers, like you had just said. And the market was and still is, to a large part, dominated by Western authors. So, how difficult was it for you to carve your niche?
It was the most difficult thing I have ever experienced. First, for getting published. So, interesting story behind this is that that night must be my first published book, but my first written book is I Hear. So, I wrote that night, and in the darkest time of my life, when I Hear You was not getting published, and I was going through these rounds of rejections, probably not rejections, just radio silence. So when the book got launched, we were very excited. Penguin was launching it. Everybody in the team liked the book a lot because they said it was very atmospheric writing and a bit of an international touch to it. Now the problem with that was that we were launching it and second wave of COVID hit. There was absolutely no footfall in the stores, no Amazon deliveries, and I'm stuck with this book, which I am a debut author with absolutely no experience in writing or marketing a book. And the journey started, and I was told, I reached out to like 10, 15 bloggers saying, I have written this book. And you won't believe what did they say. They said, we don't read Indian books by Indian authors.
Wow.
There you are. And my editor was the first person who said, no, I don't know how to place you because you are, one, you're a woman. Second, you are not writing romantic thrillers, you're writing a psychological thriller. Second, you're writing horror with it. So I'm just taking a kind of punt on you. I don't know whether it would actually do well or not. But she had fought with the entire team to kind of, take a chance on me. So we bit by bit gathered together. I sent one chapter to someone, I sent one, just a prologue to someone. And then I started getting responses that, yes, this writing is different. We will agree to reading. And I'm talking about those followers. At that time, there was no Insta following. Those book bloggers that had a huge following, and they actually started reading it, and they came back saying, we had not expected this kind of writing from you. And then I started relaxing back, to be honest, because then I knew that word of mouth will spread, and even if there is no kind of footfall in the stores, we will eventually reach where we wanted to. And that's how. So it was very, very difficult, and to be honest, it's still super difficult right now also to fight with Silent Patient, Lisa Jewell, and currently with Frida McFadden. It is a challenge, everyday challenge for me. At the bookstores, they don't want to keep it. With the readers, they want to compare it with the international authors. It is a big challenge, but we are fighting our battle.
So glad that you're this warrior queen and so
I've been
resilient.
trying.
So
I've been
resilient.
trying.
But I think, like we say, rejection is just redirection. So I think we should just,
Correct.
forge on and, something great will happen.
Right.
I'm sure greater will happen.
Yes.
All right. So speaking of that night, what inspired this book?
So I'm a huge fan of Ruth Ware, and I had finished writing I Hear You, which was a completely different story. And as I shared with you, I'm a huge fan of Michael Crichton. So my stories would tend, being an engineer by education, my stories would tend literally towards the science side of things. So I was sitting and reading this book called The Lying Gate. It's a story about 4 or 5 high schoolers, and there was a Pakistani character in it. And the way Ruth had explained that character, and the way the things, I was craving for some Asian story at that point of time, that why can't we have 4 friends who are Indian and can do something which is very, very Indian, not drugs, not running away from house. We don't do that as a teenager. So that cultural nuance was missing in their stories. So I decided probably there should be something about it. And I was in this dark phase where this one was not getting accepted. So Havi suggested that probably if you're not liking something, like Toni Morrison said, write what you want to read. So write something. So something similar or something had happened at hostel, and I have beautiful friends from the hostel time. So I started weaving the story together and came up with something that was entirely different from what I initially thought I would start.
Your India represent.
Yeah.
All right. So one of the themes of, that night is the nostalgia of our college days. Was it challenging to visualize this time jump? You went from like 20-year time jump. So was it challenging to do both?
No, I
But
think
you
it
mentioned-
was kind of a therapy for me because as facing the rejections or as you said, redirections, I was kind of, reliving my whole, I had quit work at that point of time. So I was thinking what to do. And this was the best moment of writing that night because in that story, I could see myself, my friends, and everybody. So revisiting was easier, but the challenging part of that night was that I have placed four friends in different time zones. So managing that story with four different time zones, that one WhatsApp goes from here, somebody like Natasha in Singapore or Anjali in London are in different time zones. So I have to manage that. So I had to draw a chart and keep like, this is London's time, this is, so it was that ways difficult. But in terms of going back and forth in time, in memories, no, it wasn't. And as an author, it was easier because being in Singapore for last 20 plus years, it is difficult for me to picturize what India has grown in last 20 years. So portraying India in 1997 is much easier for me to portray India of 2017 or like, right? So it became easier for me to place the stories in the time when I left India because I've missed that 20 years of growth of India. So it became easier that.
Awesome. And it's nice to know your thought process and your writing process.
Thank you so much. Even I'm realizing it, what I had done, it's so scientifically or not.
Like retrospection, right? All right. So you've also added a lot of backstories about haunted places in Singapore. So that was interesting. And do you have a special connection with them now that you say that you've lived in Singapore for such a long time?
So surprisingly enough, when I wrote that night, it wasn't meant to be a horror. I'm not an easy scare. So be it Evil Dead or any of the books, you cannot scare me. So when I wrote the book, I had pitched it as psychological thriller. When the editor took it, she had pitched it also as a psychological thriller. I had done my kind of, visiting the sites and imagining them and writing them because you cannot write Kupur Kasim or, Tanglin Brunei Hostel without visiting them. So I had seen them as a site I'm describing. I had not seen them someplace scary. And when the book ended up in the Amazon's horror bestseller, I realized I have done something wrong or I've done something right. I'm not sure.
Definitely
yeah.
right.
But then interesting part of this is that first time when I went for visit, it was the first draft. Second time when I went for visit, I had soaked in a little bit of eerie vibes because I was writing something which was scary. So by third time, I'll tell you a very interesting story on this. Probably would be a nice chat on it. So I was researching about this book and I do my research early in the morning. So that day kind of detour happened and I couldn't do anything in the morning. So I was sitting in the night and I was researching about this graveyard called Kubur Qasim. And I had told my younger one, he was 8 at that point of time, that in the night, don't knock the door if you have to come to our room. So I'm taking you to a very scary place here. So I told him that don't knock the door. So, and warned him kind of because he would disrupt my sleep. So he came in and he said, I'm scared. They do dream about things, right? So he came in and then he knocked and he realized that he shouldn't knock. So he went away. And I had just slept after looking at all the dark things. And I thought I heard a knock. So I got up and checked at the room, no one was there. I went back to sleep. I'm not an easy sleeper, right? So I went back to sleep. He came again, he knocked again, and in the sleep he realized he doesn't have to knock. Now also I got up, I thought he is there. He wasn't there. Now it started playing on me. But there is someone, and I went to his room and he's quiet. And then I came out. I asked him, did you come? Now you're scared because Mama is angry. So he said, no, I did not. And then again, third time he came after 15, 20 minutes. And I'm standing on the door, whosoever is, I'm going to kill that person. And he's standing and crying, I'm sorry, I can't sleep. And by the time I had made all my kind of stories, I must have touched someone wrongly here. Somebody's in the house. And my husband was like, can you stop writing such stories that you're scared of yourself? So yeah, so there was no scary locations, but yeah, fear is in the mind state.
I probably am not as courageous as you.